We're back.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. We're just enjoying our coffee here. And there are still some questions left open from the lunch break. So we only have 20 minutes. Let's just dive right into it. First question that I see was asked by Juan. Based on your experience, what is the best choice for handling shell routing and composition challenges? Is vendor login on the shell a good practice? Cathrin, you already laughed, and your talk was specifically about that in an Angular context.
Yeah.
What is your opinion, and how would you answer
Yeah.
that?
For sure, it depends.
There's your answer.
It can be you just need a lightweight shell, which is really just the bare minimum. But it can be you need some base, some core functionality. And some people call it belonging to the shell. Other people say it's not part of the shell. It's some foundation component, whatever. But for convenience sakes, it might make sense if you have a good UI library, a corporate design, which brings a header, which brings a sidebar navigation, which brings a footer or something, that you might use your shell also in Angular if the UI library is made from there, which makes it also easier to orchestrate, for example, routing. Doing routing by hand is a very complicated topic to get this history manipulation set up, to keep track of the state manipulation of these changes. What happens if I go on browser back and so on? So I wouldn't want to do this vanilla if I don't have to. But it depends on your application. Do you need excessive routing? Do you need heavy deep linking? Or do you have a central screen and maybe some sub areas you reach via a top level link and then all happens there? So this is bringing you to the choice if you rather use something stable, some framework or Angular itself or React itself for the outer parts, or if you can do it lightweight. Also, how much context do you have? The exact opposite would be a CMS, maybe, which is with no login state. So just a canvas, just something holding your content. Then for sure, you could go much easier with a vanilla shell than with something stateful.
All right. Anything to add?
No.
No. Let's move on then. Next one from Michela. Hybrid micro frontends, login registration flow, vertical, horizontal, yay or nay?
For me is yes. You can have vertical and horizontal split in the same application, mainly because it depends on your domains, right? So you might end up to have sometimes, for some projects, it's the homepage that requires to have a sort of dashboard or a composition of different domains. And sometimes it's maybe the my account part that you want to cover, like, the payment, the user detail, and subscription. The vast majority of the time, those are well-defined and independent domains, but you want to aggregate them into the view. And therefore, it makes sense to have an horizontal split in that side. But for the rest of the application, maybe you can use a vertical split. And it's absolutely acceptable, in my opinion. There isn't, let's say, any wrong answer over there. The only challenge that I can tell you when you are dealing with multiple domains in the same view is that it's very likely that you want to use a backend for frontend for your APIs, because it's likely that those APIs are used for other domains, and the composition is just one of the many. And in order to reduce the chattiness of the frontend with backend, it's not a bad idea if you create either an orchestration API that takes care of retrieving the data for the client instead of doing multiple calls, or you create a backend for frontend.
Yeah, and I would add, for horizontal split, ideally you just have widget micro frontends, so no routing, which reduces the complexity a lot.
Indeed.
It's not really part of the question, but hybrid micro frontends, what we notice in our teams as well is that also the integration techniques and the rendering mode may differ from team to team. When we think about an e-commerce example, server-side rendering, first load performance is extremely crucial on landing pages, on product detail pages, on product list and home pages, but it's very uncrucial in the checkout process. In the checkout process, there's simplicity or fault tolerance is much more important. So we often see a pattern where the first domains pick a server-side or a universal rendering approach, and the more back-end or maybe behind the login domains, so my account, for example, they just do client-side render and skip the complexity with also deploying server-side rendering stuff. You remain with the challenge at the integration point. Things have to, if the mini card, maybe it must be server-side rendered, or maybe you can get away with the mini-card being the one exception that is always client-side rendered. But you have to talk about and think about these integration points where these teams with different strategies meet. But I guess it's perfectly acceptable to, when you can minimize complexity, to do a non-uniform approach.
Right, and I would want to add that these are all correct answers and very general. In the specific example of login registration, you anyway quite often have the possibility to have it in a dedicated team already, because very often you're using flows which are then, let's say, tuned for single sign-on, for instance, and there you wouldn't bring this login flow directly on your site. You would then redirect somewhere else. So this is then anyway deployed independently and maybe even not in your own infrastructure, right? You're using maybe Incognito or something, AWS or Azure B2C or Entra ID, how it's now called. So Auth0, there are many cases there. And of course, someone then just designs or I don't know, puts in the logo or something for the login space. But then this login registration flow is somewhere else already. And all you care about is how do you now get the user information. And therefore, this is in some sense a special scenario anyway, which is very nice to just put somewhere else in the hands of someone or a dedicated team. Then from Jay-Z, nowadays I have a feeling in new projects that domain-driven design is always a good idea throughout the team's code and throughout these teams if they're not micro frontend ready. Would you commit on that? Maybe a quick thumbs up or thumbs down in the middle.
You have to
it depends.
That is the sign for it depends.
Yeah, okay, I can live with that. Let's do it like this.
No, it's like that.
Okay, great.
To be honest, I believe that domain-driven design helps a lot, but the problem is it's not easy to master it. And I have seen a lot of, so you can use the initial, let's say, part of domain-driven design to define an ubiquitous language between the team, identifying the boundaries using even storming, for instance. You can arrive to have the definition or categorization of a specific subdomain into generic supporting and core domain and assign characteristics to the stuff. But on the front end, let's say, arriving further down into aggregates and the read models, etc., I think it's a bit too far, and it will require a bit of abstraction in order to arrive there, because in reality you're not dealing with, let's say, schema design and models and stuff like that. So I would say that in reality, what you need is identifying your domains, definitely, and usually one thing that I recommend is spending a bit of time, because you might be surprised on the outcome of this kind of workshops. So if you use even storming, that is a technique that you can find online, was created by an Italian guy called Alberto Brandolini. It was designed for understanding the business. So you take a step back, you don't talk about technology, you look into the process and the flow. And then from there, you start to look into, you map everything, you create a timeline of how you accomplish a specific task for a user. It could be the subscription, it could be how to navigate a catalog, stuff like that. And then based on that, and you start to look into when there is a change of vocabulary on site the events that are happening. And then usually you are in a good shape for saying, okay, so probably here there is a bounded context. And then you start from that, taking out the bounded context, start to test it. And still in the design phase, you look into the events are coming in, the events are going out, how much chattiness there is between different domains. And then from there, you can start to understand that part. And this technique I use a lot. Not only for Micro Frontends, also a lot for microservices, and I'm helping customers to do that. And I truly believe that is extremely important. But in a let's say short, let's say in a short way, you can also use looking into the way how your users are using your application, because very often we think that we know how our users are using, but trust me, you can be surprised when you start to look into the click streams and Google Analytics and whatever other tool you're using, because the reality is that our perception of how the platform is used is not how our customers are doing often. And therefore, starting from that, and you start to see maybe that the user lands, when he's authenticated, lands always in the same place and use always the same tools. It will enable you also to say, oh, probably if I slice here the Micro Frontend, I can guarantee that all the authenticated users will have a fantastic experience because they never reload. Stuff like that really help. DDD is definitely amazing, but I cannot be let's say the only way to identify boundaries, because otherwise, let's say the effort or the cognitive load for starting Micro Frontends will be too high. That's my 50 cents.
That's why we usually just abbreviate it with "it depends."
Yes, but that
because
is the
there you see there are some conditions, and you need to carefully evaluate all of them to reach a good conclusion. Now, speaking of good conclusions, the next question that I have here came from Rady Murray. Currently, we are using the awesome Pirate framework, a little bit added for me for Micro Frontends, but forget about this technical aspect. We are developing a pilot, so that's a Micro Frontend, for a given domain logic where the pilot interacts with different microservices. I think that's the crucial part here, because now, what do you think of this approach? So one Micro Frontend talking to multiple microservices. This will be another episode in the "it depends" section.
I would be more absolute. I would say is inevitable, because the reality is, if you think about that, when you design any system on the back end, for better or worse, you have authentication on your way. You have, let's say, east-west communication between services. Maybe they're using HMAC, so therefore they talk with another server. Maybe you need, I don't know, translation. Maybe you need like these cross-cutting services that you have to understand, despite are not related to your domain. And sometimes, you know, you have like the request for a feature that has a lot of data in another domain. Therefore, you want to replicate on your side, but you need to take into account the cost of replicating the data, the eventual consistency of the data. So there are a lot of things that you need to take into account. So I believe that at some point, you will end up that you need to handle that situation. And if it becomes too chatty, backend for frontend is your best friend.
I think that the question is not if your system can talk to a microservice. The question is, what microservice does it talk to? So if you have three teams with different domains, and they talk to each other through microservice or have shared code in there, then this may be a smell, and you maybe have to investigate. If they all talk to the authentication database or put something into tracking, whatever, then this is perfectly fine.
Exactly.
Yeah. But to simplify the rollout and the configuration, I would also vote for backend for frontend approach and just let the backend for frontend talk to the different APIs.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Depends on what we're talking about.
It always depends, right? So, but there are some nice benefits you would get from Gateway or BFF. So, for instance, also you wouldn't need a token anymore, right? So you could solve it, for instance, with a session cookie, which then solves another area where a natural question often comes up with Micro Frontends. How do I distribute the token, right? So because either you would need to, I don't know, hijack fetch and say, then we always, if it goes to the right domain, we place the token in there, or you have some event beforehand on the client, give me a tokens from somewhere. So all things a little bit shaky, and so it's just implied, right? The cookie is just from the browser into it, and you're happy. And but again, this is just one of the things where I say, then if you have a BFF or a gateway, it's great, because another thing that you can put on top of it, but doesn't mean it's the only way. And there are certainly pros and cons. All right, so another great one from the Tech Trends with Via. Nice to have you. It's awesome. Is it advisable to separate the header and footer into distinct microfrontends to avoid redeploying them across multiple applications? Or would this approach negatively affect performance? So in other words, we are now using microfrontends for, runtime components that we want to reuse. good use case or not? Again, I think we could say it depends already, but maybe on what does it
Yeah,
depend?
it depends on what data is in there, I guess. So if we have an
Yeah.
e-commerce header with the product catalog, flyout navigation, lots of complex stuff, auto-suggest in there, this may be a good idea that there's a team behind this header that works on this header, implements new feature, tests out stuff. If it's this dumb header of a back office application, it's just a collection of links that change every few weeks, months, whatever, then it can be a component in the component library or fixed part, as you said before, of your application.
Yeah, I would collect it that you don't have this footer and header separate, but maybe some layout frame as a core component, and then have one instance of this. Because I've also seen projects where we had a library version of this header, and then on multiple screens connected via hyperlinks, we had different versions of the header, and then some link was missing or so. I wouldn't recommend this. And if it has to be dynamic, there's also the option to make this header or the sidebar navigation configurable, that every micro frontend can contribute some entry points, and it's a composition of this configuration provided by different MFEs. But the UI component, I would make central singleton.
You want to see the question regarding
Yeah.
the cake? Okay, then we got maybe already the most relevant question from Robson here. Is Michael still hiding behind the first piece of cake from the first, I think what is meant is the lunch break?
Yeah.
Who will answer this question?
Not me.
I mean, you need to. I have
Okay,
my
okay.
opinion here, and that is not, it depends.
No, the fact is, I ate the first one and now I'm on the second one.
Yeah. There's no jigsaw on it, so.
Yes. Yeah, the first one was MIC, and now I'm at FER for front end, I guess. No, FER.
Yeah.
Conference.
Conference. Yeah.
So yeah, we have printing on there. I guess it's. I should have shown the first one to get proof.
Yeah.
You have to believe me.
Alrighty. So maybe one final question because we are almost at the end. This is a remark. Maybe let's see. Yeah, okay. This is, I think, a question. Is a question mark. But how do we effectively manage common component across micro frontend?
Yeah, have a core application. It doesn't need to be the shell itself. It can be some core micro frontend, but please take care to not have multiple instances of the header and have some common shared layout.
Okay, well, this was a quick one. So then let's see. There's someone else. Robson, very awesome. I think this is just another remark, but let's maybe bring it in the stream from Reddy regarding the question before. And our teams are not separated for different domains. Okay, yeah, I mean, you can do that. There can also be technical reasons for doing micro frontends, but of course, it makes most sense if you can put them in different domains, right? Each team can contribute to different microservices and different micro frontends. Okay. The context would be here more interesting, I guess. With your replies, there's something to improve here. Yeah.
It depends, no?
I guess my favorite.
I don't want to rule it out, right? So there might be
Yeah.
good reasons for doing it.
Yeah.
At first glance, I would say there is really room for improvement, but then again, I'm missing a lot of the context here, I feel. But
Sorry, Michael, you were
Yeah,
saying.
I guess ownership is something I find from experience is really crucial. So every piece of software needs someone who feels that it's their own, even as a person or as a team, so that this does not. So someone takes care of this piece of software and develops it and takes care of maintaining dependencies and whatever. And maybe you have something in your setup where ownership and enough responsibility is taken by the group. This is not ruled out, but
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you, I mean, they're using Pyro. So one thing that I can think of, which would make it, let's say, feasible is that they might have a monorepo or similar setup, and where they say for them it's important that at runtime it gets composed per user, right? So that you have all these fragments that can come in or not, depending on the user. So it's not about now for the teams to really scale up for microphones, but it's really the technical reason. You want to be able to compose dynamically at runtime and have this all figured out by the framework. So this is at the moment my take that. Then I see there's a valid point. And also, of course, that's why they can contribute to everything, because after all, it's just like this monorepo where they say, I just contribute to this one thing or the other thing. And at the end, that these are different things. It's just because for the one user, this might be active, for the other this, and for a third one, maybe both modules. So yeah, that's just
for multi-tenancy, I've seen quite a lot of small teams embracing Micro Frontends, because usually they say 80% of my B2B application is identical. But there are the 20% that I want to customize per customers, and therefore they can say they can divide. Usually they split in a vertical fashion, so they have like a page or group of pages that represent like the onboarding experience with login and sign up, etc. Then they have like the settings part that are common, but then they have like the internal part. Like I've seen already twice with companies that are dealing with the digital till that you have at the restaurant, where you can select the table or whatever. So the part of how you design the tables is custom, and maybe they have different functionalities. So in that case, I've seen that they build potentially multiple micro frontends in that part, but the rest remains independent. That is a very nice way, despite you are a small team, to leverage the independence of micro frontends.
Alrighty.
A couple of months ago, I saw a talk from a lead tech from ING, so the Dutch financial institution, bank, whatever they have a mobile app that runs in all over Europe, I guess. And the thing he described was very micro front-end-like in the technical composition part. So you have features that are small fragments, more of widgets that compose to complete pages. And they said that they try to remove the concept of pages and just thought about features. But they had a very interesting approach from my perspective, that the ownership part, they scrapped that and said, okay, we have a team, and the next team who's free can pick off the list, pick one of the new features, and then build a feature, have this widget contributed to the complete code base, monorepo, for example, and then deploy it. And they have in all of these countries people that configure their local app, the German app, the Spanish app, whatever, from these components. And they divide the feature development with delivering the actual stuff. And they said for them that was a really efficient process. And it has a lot of in common with what we are talking about, but it's not the same.
Okay.
All right. I think we also have a raffle here. So let's do the raffle.